blazing romance, a whispered betrayal, and one devastating choice. This is the story of Arthur Devereux, a millionaire whose heart strayed from his pregnant wife the moment a cunning mistress worked her way into his life. When heartache replaces love, secrets unravel, and a proud wife quietly disappears, no one could have predicted how the wheels of karma would begin turning. In a world where fortunes can shift like desert sands, relationships can shatter in a single heartbeat. Prepare for a storm of intense emotions, jealousy, and spine-chilling regret. Because sometimes it takes losing everything to finally see the truth. Arthur Devereux was a man whose very name spelled success. Born into a modest family in a small town on the outskirts of Boston, he had risen through hard work, innovation, and sheer charisma to become one of the most sought-after entrepreneurs in the country. At the age of 32, he possessed not only a commanding presence, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that always seemed intentionally tousled, but also a net worth that was rumored to be in the high 8 figures. By the time he turned 35, Arthur had expanded his business empire from a single tech startup to a diversified conglomerate that included luxury hotels, property developments, and even a fashion label. His name circulated among the city's elite like an idol made of gold. Wall Street bankers invited him to private golf clubs, and Hollywood celebrities clamored to attend his extravagant soirees. His photographs appeared in glossy magazines, depicting a life of infinite possibilities and, by the look of them, infinite joy. Amid the bright lights and champagne toasts, Arthur had met Rosalind O'Reilly, soon to become Rosalind Devereux. Rosalind was a lawyer from New York who specialized in corporate litigation. She had a quiet dignity about her, a poised intelligence that was more compelling than any brash display of confidence. Where Arthur's energy felt unstoppable, like a waterfall crashing against the rocks, Rosalind's presence was a calm, deep river, exuding grace and depth. Their meeting was orchestrated at a philanthropic gala in Manhattan, rumored to have been arranged by a mutual friend, Jacob Henderson, who believed they would form a powerful alliance. Indeed, they did, both in business and in love. The courtship was swift, an intense whirlwind of late-night dinners, weekend getaways, and a deep intellectual bond. Despite Arthur's flamboyant lifestyle, Rosalind gave him balance. She was often the voice of reason when his impulsive decisions threatened to drive him off the rails. They married in a sprawling ceremony in Napa Valley, with white roses lining the pathways and a string quartet playing under a canopy of twinkling lights. Friends whispered that Arthur had finally found the love of his life. Guests teased that they had never seen him so smitten, so grounded, and so hopeful for a stable future. Life seemed perfect for the newlyweds, who established a home in a luxurious penthouse overlooking Central Park. They were the power couple, attending high-profile events, supporting charities, and making joint appearances in magazines. Photographers loved capturing Arthur's arm around Rosalind's waist, the two always looking elegantly in sync. Little did anyone know that hidden beneath the polished surface were cracks that would widen when a singular destructive force, a cunning and irresistible woman, slithered into the fabric of their marriage. And like many cautionary tales, the seeds of tragedy were planted when everything appeared most idyllic. One brisk February evening, Arthur and Rosalind hosted an opulent gathering at their penthouse. The event was a launch party for a new initiative by the Devereux Foundation, a scholarship fund aimed at underprivileged students interested in technology. The atmosphere was sparkling with conversation and filled with the tinkling sound of crystal glasses. Jazz music drifted from the corner, where a live band performed classic standards. It was at this party that Cecilia Lancaster made her grand entrance. A tall, willowy brunette with high cheekbones and eyes that seemed to change color depending on the light, Cecilia was a rising figure in the world of interior design. She had an air of mystery around her, always dressed in the most fashionable attire, carrying herself as though the world was but a stage for her private performance. She introduced herself to Arthur with an enthusiastic handshake, something about wanting to discuss a potential collaboration for her design project in the new Devereux hotel chain. Her words dripped with praise for Arthur's visionary business sense, her tone hovering just on the edge of flirtation. Arthur, flattered by her attentiveness, spent longer than necessary talking about plans, expansions, and the nuances of his brand. Rosalind, ever the watchful spouse, sensed something unsettling in the exchange. She couldn't pinpoint the exact source of discomfort. Perhaps it was the way Cecilia's gaze lingered on Arthur as he spoke, or how her laughter chimed too readily at his jokes. Maybe it was simply that Rosalind sensed the faintest aura of rivalry emanating from this alluring woman. Whatever the reason, Rosalind felt an anxious knot form in her stomach, a warning that something might be amiss. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the staff had cleared the remnants of caviar and champagne, Rosalind confided in Arthur, "There's something about that designer, Cecilia, that makes me uneasy," she said gently, sipping a glass of water while looking out at the city lights. Arthur chuckled, pressing a quick kiss to his wife's temple. "Ros, you're just protective. It's sweet. But trust me, she's just another ambitious business contact. Besides," he added with a small grin, "no one could possibly compare to you." Relieved by his reassurance, Rosalind allowed herself to relax. She decided it was her overactive imagination, her own insecurities, creeping out in the face of so many wealthy, confident women swirling around her husband. Rosalind told herself that a strong marriage built on love and trust wouldn't buckle so easily to a passing storm. She had no idea that the storm was not passing, but gathering strength. Over the next few weeks, Arthur mentioned Cecilia Lancaster more often than Rosalind would have preferred. He marveled at Cecilia's bold design concepts, the way she could transform a dull office into a contemporary masterpiece. He described the synergy he felt with her while brainstorming creative expansions for the new Devereux Hotel in Miami. His words carried an enthusiasm that hinted at more than just professional admiration. Rosalind tried her best to stay calm. She reminded herself that her husband was a man of vision, someone who thrived on collaboration with exciting, dynamic partners. However, it nagged at her that Arthur was beginning to come home later and later. Meetings with Cecilia, site visits, and late-night strategy sessions seemed to dominate his schedule. Often, Rosalind would wait up for him, only to find herself dozing off on the couch when he finally stepped through the door near midnight. One evening, as she leafed through the day's mail, Rosalind discovered a magazine featuring an article about Arthur's business expansions. The spread contained photographs from the construction sites and interviews with key collaborators. Rosalind froze when she saw Cecilia, perched close to Arthur at one of the new hotels, both of them grinning broadly at the camera. The photo's caption read, "Millionaire mogul Arthur Devereux and rising star designer Cecilia Lancaster discuss innovations in luxury living." Something about their body language, the tilt of Cecilia's head toward Arthur, the almost intimate grin on her face, made Rosalind's heart plummet. That same night, Arthur returned home to find Rosalind standing in the living room, magazine in hand. This is just for publicity, he insisted, a note of impatience creeping into his voice. You know how these journalists are. They pick the most dramatic photos. Is there something you're not telling me? Rosalind asked quietly, searching his eyes for some sign of guilt or reassurance. But Arthur, feeling cornered, became defensive. Ros, I'm busy building an empire. Yes, I'm working closely with Cecilia. She's talented, but that's it. I'm not a child. I'm not being seduced by every woman who smiles at me. The sharpness of his tone stung Rosalind. In all their years together, including the courtship, she had rarely seen him speak with such irritation toward her. She swallowed her hurt, nodding. I'm not accusing you, she said softly. I worry. We've always been honest with each other. I don't want to lose that. Arthur sighed and pulled her into a half-hearted embrace. You won't lose anything, he mumbled. Trust me, everything is fine. But deep down, Rosalind felt that a shift was underway. Arthur's lips told her one story, but his eyes told another. And she couldn't ignore the creeping dread that something precious was slipping through her fingers. Despite the emotional turbulence swirling between them, a ray of hopeful light appeared in Rosalind's life. She discovered she was pregnant. For a few blissful hours, she forgot all her doubts and the tension in her marriage. She ran to her doctor's office to confirm the results, her heart pounding with anticipation. The test was unequivocally positive. Rosalind's eyes filled with tears of joy. She had always wanted to be a mother. She planned an intimate announcement for Arthur. That evening, she set the dinner table with elegant care, lighting candles and placing a small, wrapped gift box at Arthur's place setting. When he walked in, distracted and exhausted from another long day, she beckoned him toward the table. He looked mildly surprised, but sat down. She handed him the gift box, her eyes shining. Arthur opened it to find a tiny pair of baby shoes and a note. We're expecting. I hope you'll be with us on this new journey. For a moment, Arthur's face lit up with genuine happiness. He stood, gathered her into his arms, and pressed a long kiss to her forehead. This is incredible news, Ros, he murmured. We're going to have a baby. That's amazing. Tears of relief slipped down her cheeks. For the first time in many weeks, she felt the old Arthur, warm, joyful, and full of love, had returned. They talked about baby names and the future that lay ahead. Arthur even mentioned clearing some time in his schedule to accompany her to doctor's appointments, determined to be an involved father. But as the days turned into weeks, that promise of involvement began to wither. While Arthur expressed genuine excitement about the child, his commitments at work seemed to multiply. He was forever traveling, meeting with investors, checking up on new projects in distant cities. And, inevitably, every mention of these trips also included Cecilia Lancaster. Rosalind tried not to let it unsettle her. After all, he had a business to run. But there was no denying that during a period when she needed him most, morning sickness, prenatal visits, emotional support, Arthur was too often absent. A pang of insecurity gnawed at her heart each time Arthur mentioned a late-night strategy session with Cecilia or a newly furnished suite she had designed in his Miami hotel. Rosalind, a sharp lawyer by profession, found herself floundering in an emotional labyrinth at home. She tried to rationalize it. Arthur loved her. He had shown so much excitement about the baby. There was no reason to suspect his affections might be waning. Yet the reality told a different story. Whenever he returned home from these trips, his mind seemed light years away. Sometimes he would barely acknowledge the house, let alone notice that his pregnant wife had spent hours preparing a meal or was struggling with back pain. As the second trimester of her pregnancy approached, Rosalind felt a wedge of distance expanding between them. Their conversations revolved around superficial updates or logistical concerns. The emotional closeness, the shared laughter, the gentle caresses, they were all diminishing like a fading echo. The moment that shattered Rosalind's illusions came on a sunny afternoon in late May. She was visiting Arthur's office to drop off some documents relating to a legal case he was overseeing for one of his subsidiaries. She had tried calling him earlier, but he hadn't picked up. Thinking it might be a welcome surprise, she decided to show up unannounced. As she stepped into his opulent office suite, a lavish space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, she noticed the door to Arthur's private conference room was slightly ajar. She heard voices. One belonged to her husband, the other to Cecilia Lancaster. They were talking in hushed tones, but the words were clear enough. "Why are you so distant today?" Cecilia murmured. "Don't you want me here?" Arthur's response was muffled. "Cecilia, I'm juggling a lot. Rosalind's pregnant, and I can't just... She's my wife. It's complicated. But you and I both know she doesn't stimulate you like I do," Cecilia pressed, her tone possessive and almost triumphant. "You keep saying you'll handle it, that you'll figure out a way. Are you stalling, or do you really want me in your life?" Rosalind's grip on the documents trembled. Her mind raced, unwilling to fully register what her ears were hearing. She had suspected something was wrong, but to have the ugly truth laid bare so brazenly felt like a punch to the gut. Tears sprang to her eyes as she heard her husband's deep sigh. "I just need more time," Arthur said, voice low. "She's pregnant, Cecilia. I can't leave her now. It would ruin my reputation and complicate everything." Cecilia's response dripped with sarcasm. "So your reputation matters more than your happiness? Don't forget, I'm risking a lot being involved with you. I expect you to hold up your end of whatever it is we're doing." Rosalind couldn't bear to hear another word. Clutching the documents to her chest, she hurried out of the office, tears streaming down her face. She felt physically ill, the emotional betrayal compounding the turbulent hormones of her pregnancy. She managed to hail a taxi and sobbed the entire ride home, her mind reeling. In one instant, all her hopes had been dashed. Arthur had not only betrayed her love, but had been stringing her along with half-truths. While she daydreamed of a joyful future with their child, he had been forging a different path with Cecilia. It was more than heartbreak. It was devastation. By the time she reached the penthouse, her shock had morphed into a numbing despair that spread through her entire being. That evening, Rosalind did not confront Arthur. She watched from the bedroom window as he arrived home, looking pensive and exhausted. He barely came inside before removing his tie and disappearing into his home office. Perhaps he thought she had left the office before overhearing anything. Perhaps he was so consumed by guilt he couldn't face her. Whatever the reason, Rosalind felt like she was living with a stranger. Unable to keep her turmoil bottled up, Rosalind confided in her closest friend, Juliana Park. A fellow lawyer who worked at another prestigious firm, Juliana had known Rosalind since law school. They had navigated the competitive halls of Harvard together, shared heartbreak stories over cheap wine in tiny apartments, and celebrated each other's victories with genuine sisterhood. Rosalind laid bare the entire situation, the suspicions, the overheard conversation, the heartbreak. Juliana listened intently, occasionally interjecting with sharp questions. Once Rosalind finished, she let out a trembling breath. "Ross, this is more serious than you realize," Juliana said gravely, setting aside her coffee cup. You have to decide what you want, not just for yourself, but for your baby. Arthur is in the wrong here, but how you handle it will define your life for years to come. Rosalind pressed a hand over her belly, feeling a flutter from within. I love him, but I can't stay in a marriage that's built on lies. Yet, I don't want my child to grow up without a father. Juliana squeezed her hand gently. Perhaps you should talk to him. Get a sense of what he really wants. Sometimes these affairs are illusions. Maybe he's caught up in the excitement. Or maybe, she paused, glancing at the heartbreak etched across Rosalind's face. Maybe he's gone too far. That night, Rosalind resolved to have a conversation with Arthur. The tension in the penthouse was almost tangible as they sat across from each other on the living room couch. Rosalind took a deep breath, tears threatening to rise again, and told him she knew. She repeated snippets of the conversation she had overheard, her voice trembling. Arthur went pale. He stammered, trying to find an explanation, or at least a rationalization for what he'd done. It was a mistake, he said, voice quivering. I got carried away. Cecilia was there at a time when I was feeling pressured, and You betrayed me, Arthur, Rosalind whispered, her tears sliding down her cheeks. And you did so while our child is growing inside of me. How do I move past that? Arthur tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. Listen, I promise it's over. I'll cut ties with Cecilia if that's what you want. I can't lose you. I'm sorry. Rosalind stared at him, her heart pounding. For a moment, she almost believed him. Then she remembered the earlier conversation, the part about his reputation and not wanting to leave her now. The apology, the contrition, was it genuine or just a desperate attempt to mitigate consequences? She stood, wiping tears from her eyes. Arthur, I need you to prove it, not with words, but with actions. In the days that followed, Arthur seemed determined to salvage the marriage. He started coming home early, taking Rosalind to doctor's appointments, and even set up a nursery in one of the penthouse's spare rooms. He assured her he had ended the affair with Cecilia Lancaster, though he offered few details. Rosalind tried to remain hopeful, to believe that the father of her child was capable of true remorse. However, what neither of them realized was that Cecilia Lancaster was not someone who would step aside quietly. To her, Arthur was a critical rung on the ladder to success, wealth, and social power. A mere fling could be replaced, but a genuine opportunity to become the partner of a millionaire mogul. That was not so easily relinquished. She began a subtle campaign to undermine Rosalind's confidence. Late at night, she would send Arthur text messages or emails. If he didn't respond, she would escalate, calling his office repeatedly until he caved. Arthur, knowing it was a risk, tried to maintain distance, but sometimes he would answer her out of guilt or fear that she might do something drastic. Rosalind, wary of her husband's phone, ever since discovering the affair, occasionally glanced at it. She wasn't proud of herself, but her trust had been shattered. One day, she found an email from Cecilia that sent her trembling with fresh anger. It read, "You can't just cast me aside, Arthur. I know too much. Our arrangement was never meant to end this way. If you think your wife is going to accept you after she learns the real reason we started this relationship, you're naive." The real reason, Rosalind muttered to herself, her heart pounding. She confronted Arthur that evening, waving the email in his face. What is she talking about? Is there more to this than a fling? Arthur turned ashen, but he insisted it meant nothing. She's just lashing out, because I ended it. Don't believe a word she says. But the doubt gnawed at Rosalind's already fragile sense of stability. She wondered if Cecilia Lancaster had more power over Arthur than he was willing to admit. Her nightmares returned, images of Arthur being lost forever to a woman who was cunning enough to manipulate him at his weakest moments. Stress took its toll on Rosalind's pregnancy. She began experiencing early contractions and alarming spikes in her blood pressure. Her doctor warned her sternly to avoid emotional distress, emphasizing that too much strain could endanger both her life and that of her unborn child. Despite these warnings, she found herself enveloped by anxiety. Arthur, though remorseful, seemed unable to break the hold Cecilia had on him completely. Business deals that once flourished started encountering snags, and he blamed everything from the economy to incompetent partners, never quite acknowledging that his personal turmoil might be affecting his decision-making. During one of these stressful weeks, Arthur received a cryptic phone call from Cecilia. She demanded to meet him in person at a small cafe near her design studio. Against his better judgment, Arthur agreed, hoping to finally put an end to her harassment. As they sat across from each other, Cecilia wore a triumphant smirk. "I know you told Rosalind," she said, sipping her latte. "But did you tell her everything, Arthur? Did you mention that at the start you pursued me to help you land the new luxury contracts in Paris and Singapore? That you dangled the prospect of an official partnership to keep me close?" Arthur's face darkened. "That's not how it went," he hissed. "We had mutual interests, yes, but you were the one who seduced me." She leaned forward. "We can spin this however we want, but we both know the facts. And if your sweet wife discovers every detail, including how you insulted her behind her back, well, let's just say your reputation won't be the only thing destroyed." Arthur felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. Cecilia was holding him hostage with threats of exposure. If the press found out the full scope of their entanglement, it could jeopardize not only his marriage, but also his standing in the business world. The Devereux empire was built on prestige and carefully cultivated public opinion. He left the cafe feeling a pit of dread in his stomach. Little did he know that Rosalind, advised by Juliana Park, had hired a private investigator to gather the truth about Cecilia's background. Rosalind was tired of living in half-truths. If Arthur wouldn't tell her everything, she would find it out herself. The investigator, a methodical man named Brandon Caldwell, assembled a file that was as disturbing as it was enlightening. Cecilia Lancaster had a history of latching onto wealthy men, courting them with her refined charm and artistic flair. Some of those men had gone bankrupt. Others had parted with large sums of money to keep her silent about various improprieties. She also had a habit of manipulating their personal relationships, sometimes resulting in messy divorces. In short, she was a professional at driving men away from their families and into her calculating arms. When Brandon presented the file to Rosalind, she felt her blood turn cold. She saw evidence of Cecilia's pattern: old text messages, scandalous photographs, NDAs signed by previous victims. Rosalind's heart ached as she recalled the early days of her own relationship with Arthur. She had believed herself secure, special, so sure that their love was unwavering. Now, confronted by the grim reality that her husband was just another rung on Cecilia's ladder, she felt both betrayed and oddly relieved. At least the confusion was gone. The truth was laid bare. Armed with this information, Rosalind confronted Arthur directly. She handed him the file and stood back, watching his expression as he flipped through the pages. The color drained from his face. "I didn't know the full extent of this," he whispered, eyes darting over the damning evidence. "I knew she had a certain ambition. But this? Rosalind folded her arms over her chest, feeling both anger and heartbreak. Now you see who you risked our marriage for? This is the woman you let come between us, while I'm pregnant with your child. Arthur sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. He muttered apologies, expressing horror at how easily he'd been manipulated. For a moment, Rosalind felt a spark of pity for him, but she also recognized that his choices, his hubris, had paved the way for all of this. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said quietly. "Trust is like glass, Arthur. You shattered it." In the final month of her pregnancy, Rosalind found it increasingly difficult to navigate the emotional landmines at home. Arthur alternated between remorse and frustration, sometimes lashing out in anger at her for snooping or hiring a private investigator, though deep down he understood why she had done it. Cecilia's threats continued, and the stress hung in the air like a poisonous fog. One evening, as Rosalind reclined on the couch, her feet swollen from the day and her nerves shot, Arthur walked in, phone clutched in his hand. His face was contorted in anger. "She just threatened to leak photos of us, intimate photos, if I don't arrange a meeting with one of my biggest investors. She wants a partnership to expand her design studio globally." Rosalind closed her eyes, feeling the tension coil like a snake around her chest. "And what do you plan to do?" He ran a hand through his hair. "I'll do anything to protect our family, even if it means appeasing her demands temporarily. But I have a team of lawyers. We might be able to crush her in court if she tries anything." Rosalind felt a wave of sorrow wash over her. "Even if you crush her in court, the damage is done to us, Arthur. Every day that passes, I feel this distance. I can't live like this anymore. Ros, please, just a bit longer. Let me handle this. Once we're sure she can't harm us, we can move on." She exhaled, tears brimming in her eyes. For all his wealth and power, Arthur seemed impotent against the manipulative grip Cecilia had on his life. And yet Rosalind knew she was at her breaking point. She had to think of her own health and that of her unborn child. Early one morning, with dawn's first light bathing the city in a gentle glow, Rosalind made a decision that would change everything. She packed a single suitcase with essentials and stuffed a duffel bag with baby clothes and maternity items. Then she wrote a short letter to Arthur. "Arthur, I am leaving. I cannot fight for us anymore when you won't fully let go of the woman who ruined our marriage. My health and our child's health depend on me finding peace. I'm going to a place where I can breathe again. I hope you realize what you have lost before it is too late. Rosalind." She placed the letter on the kitchen counter, took one last look around the penthouse she had called home for years, and quietly left. The doorman, concerned by her tear-stained face and luggage, offered to call her a car. She accepted with a sad smile, grateful for the small kindness. Rosalind checked into a private maternity retreat an hour outside of the city. Juliana had discovered it through her legal contacts, a tranquil estate designed for high-profile women who needed privacy during pregnancy. Set on acres of lush gardens, the facility offered counseling, relaxation therapy, and around-the-clock medical care. It was precisely the sanctuary Rosalind needed. She settled into a suite overlooking a small pond, the sound of fountain water gently lapping at the edges. For the first time in months, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. No more waiting for Arthur to come home late. No more fear of Cecilia's manipulations. No more emotional torment in her final weeks of pregnancy. She was alone, but at least she was safe. When Arthur discovered Rosalind's letter, he felt as though the ground had vanished beneath his feet. He tore through the penthouse, calling her name, checking every room. Realizing she was truly gone, he felt a stab of panic so intense it nearly took his breath away. She had left without a fight, without the dramatic confrontation he had expected. Her absence was a deafening silence that swallowed all the background noise of his life. He tried calling her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He reached out to Juliana, who refused to disclose Rosalind's location. "She needs space," Juliana insisted, her voice ice-cold. "You had your chance, Arthur, and you blew it." Desperate, Arthur combed through credit card transactions, scoured flight bookings, even reached out to local car services. But Rosalind had been meticulous. She had left no digital trail. With each dead end, Arthur's regret expanded. He remembered the moment he met her, the wedding vow he made to always protect her, to cherish her. He thought of the child growing within her womb, a child he might not get to see, brought into this world if he didn't rectify his mistakes. Days turned into weeks. Arthur's attempts to manage business matters were overshadowed by thoughts of his missing wife. He neglected meetings, refused social invitations, and even cancelled important deals. His employees whispered that he had become a ghost of himself, pale, restless, and prone to snapping at the slightest provocation. Cecilia sensed the shift as well. She tried to corner Arthur with new demands, but he rebuffed her at every turn. No longer enthralled or intimidated, he finally saw her for the opportunist she was. "Get out of my life," he snarled during one tense phone call. "I'll take my chances in court if you try to smear me, but you're done controlling me." Yet the feeling of triumph against Cecilia was hollow compared to the agonizing realization that he might have lost Rosalind forever. His mind kept replaying scenes of their happiest moments: walks in Central Park, quiet dinners in fancy restaurants, lazy Sundays in bed. Each memory was a knife twisting deeper into his chest. While Arthur Devereux sat alone in his penthouse, his once gleaming empire now fragile beneath his feet, Cecilia Lancaster launched the final blow. One crisp Monday morning, gossip headlines exploded across every major entertainment site and tabloid outlet. Exclusive: Arthur Devereux's illicit affair exposed. Designer Mistress spills all. The centerpiece of the story was a collection of intimate photos. Arthur and Cecilia embracing in various discreet locations, including hotel lobbies, dimly lit dinners, and even inside what appeared to be his own office. The accompanying article was filled with carefully crafted allegations, implying that Arthur had fathered an illegitimate child and used corporate funds to support Cecilia's lifestyle. The damage was immediate and savage. Phones inside the Devereux Corporation rang incessantly. PR advisors scrambled to issue statements, but no amount of spin could contain the tidal wave of public judgment. Arthur's name trended globally, but for all the wrong reasons. The man once celebrated for his strategic brilliance and philanthropic vision had overnight become a symbol of greed, betrayal, and moral collapse. Behind closed doors, corporate partners panicked. One by one, investors withdrew their commitments. A lucrative tech merger, months in negotiation, was abruptly cancelled. A French luxury conglomerate, once eager to collaborate on a new hotel brand, severed ties without hesitation. Arthur's inbox flooded with cold, legalese-laden notices, cancellations, contract terminations, withdrawal clauses. His lawyers, once confident and well-composed, now voiced alarm about potential lawsuits from shareholders accusing him of breaching fiduciary duties. Inside the penthouse, Arthur moved like a ghost. He sat in his study surrounded by silent phones and unopened newspapers, the walls echoing with the aftermath of his undoing. He barely ate. The world he had so carefully constructed, polished, powerful, and untouchable, was collapsing with a vengeance, brick by brick. Cecilia, for her part, had gone silent. She had gotten what she wanted: notoriety, attention, and a shot at her own name in the spotlight. Rumors began circulating that she had already secured a new contract with a rival hotel chain, using her relationship with Arthur as leverage. She had moved on like a seasoned predator, unbothered by the carnage left in her wake. Meanwhile, miles away, in the calm sanctuary of the maternity retreat, Rosalind watched it all unfold from a quiet television in the lounge. The other women there, many high-profile in their own right, cast sympathetic glances, some whispering in hushed tones, but no one dared approach her directly. Her last name said enough. Sitting alone, her hands resting protectively over her rounded belly, Rosalind stared at the screen with a strange mixture of sorrow and satisfaction. Watching Arthur's downfall didn't fill her with joy, but there was a brutal sense of justice in it. The man who had humiliated her, lied to her, neglected her during the most vulnerable time of her life, was now being laid bare before the world. He was paying a price, not just in reputation and wealth, but in soul-crushing isolation. Still, it hurt. This was not the future she had dreamed of when she married him under the twinkling lights of Napa Valley. The man now disgraced in headlines had once been her best friend, her protector, the father of her unborn child. That person seemed like a ghost now, swept away by pride and lust and a hunger for validation. The retreat staff, deeply protective of their patients' privacy, tightened security around Rosalind. Paparazzi had begun circling the perimeter after catching wind that Arthur's wife was in hiding. News vans parked discreetly on nearby roads. Rumors swirled online. Some claimed Rosalind was preparing to file for divorce with a record-breaking settlement. Others speculated she would return to Arthur for a second chance. Rosalind ignored it all. She had no statement to make, no drama to feed. Her focus was Gabriel, the baby who would soon arrive into this chaotic world. Back in the city, Arthur grew increasingly unrecognizable to those who once admired him. The confident visionary now wandered his empty penthouse with hollow eyes, his phone heavy in his hand, waiting for a call from Rosalind that never came. Business associates stopped returning his messages. Friends politely distanced themselves. Even his once loyal staff requested transfers or resignations, eager to escape the firestorm that clung to his name. One night, he sat on the floor of Gabriel's unused nursery. The room was half-decorated, a forgotten project from his brief attempt at redemption. He traced his fingers over the edge of a crib he had never assembled, a stuffed animal still wrapped in plastic sitting nearby. He hadn't seen Rosalind in weeks. He hadn't heard her voice. And worst of all, he had no idea what his son looked like. In that moment, amid the silence of a broken home, Arthur realized the full weight of what he had done, not just to his career, but to the one person who had loved him without condition, the one person he had thrown away for an illusion. And as he bowed his head, tears falling freely, he understood. The storm had broken, and he was standing in its wreckage, utterly, irrevocably alone. Late one evening, Arthur received a letter delivered by courier. It was from the lawyer of one of his major business partners in France, terminating their partnership immediately. The letter cited moral and ethical breaches as the cause. Arthur realized, with growing dread, that his once impressive empire was on the brink of collapse. Bankers called in loans, investors withdrew their capital, and lawsuits began piling up. This was karma, bearing down on him with a force he had never imagined possible. And in the midst of all this destruction, his greatest anguish was not the financial ruin or the loss of prestige. It was that he couldn't share his pain with the one person who had always understood him, Rosalind. She was gone, likely for good, and he had only himself to blame. As if the universe wanted to deliver one final blow, Arthur learned through a mutual friend that Cecilia Lancaster had secured a major contract with a rival hotel chain. It seemed she had jumped to her next stepping stone, leaving him in the dust to face his scandal alone. He felt a bitterness unlike anything he had known. She had used him, and he had let her, ultimately sacrificing his marriage in the process. Desperate for some form of redemption, Arthur poured money into philanthropic causes, hoping to show the public he still cared about doing good. But cynics labeled it a PR stunt. In private, he donated heavily to women's shelters and crisis lines, haunted by the thought of Rosalind feeling unsafe and unprotected. None of it filled the gaping void left by her absence. Time marched on. Rosalind's due date approached, and the maternity retreat's doctors prepared for the arrival of her baby. Juliana visited her often, bringing cheerful flowers and small gifts. Despite the heartbreak, Rosalind found a gentle calm in the final days of her pregnancy. She felt her baby moving inside her, a reminder that new life was about to begin, regardless of the chaos swirling in the outside world. Labor pains struck late one night. Nurses rushed to her side, administering pain relief and guiding her through each contraction. Juliana held her hand, whispering words of encouragement. Hours later, as the sun began to rise, Rosalind gave birth to a baby boy. Tears of joy and relief coursed down her face. In that moment, the heartbreak, betrayal, and scandal felt distant. All that mattered was the soft cry of her newborn child, the miracle in her arms. For days, she stayed in the quiet sanctuary of her private suite, bonding with her son. She named him Gabriel, symbolizing hope and a new chapter. She sent a brief note to her parents, sharing the news of Gabriel's safe arrival and requesting privacy. But she did not contact Arthur. She wasn't sure she wanted him to be a part of this new life, at least not yet. Word eventually reached Arthur that Rosalind had given birth. A mutual acquaintance had spotted Juliana purchasing baby items, and after some cajoling, discovered the child had arrived. Arthur nearly collapsed from the emotional weight of it. His child was here, his flesh and blood, and he didn't even know his son's name. Without hesitation, Arthur set out to find Rosalind. He hired his own investigator to track her down. After some discreet digging, he finally learned about the maternity retreat. Armed with the information, he drove there himself, heart pounding at the thought of seeing Rosalind and their baby. When he arrived, the receptionist hesitated to let him in. "We have strict privacy rules, Mr. Devereaux," she said, eyeing him warily. "We can't allow visitors without the patient's consent." Desperate, Arthur said, "Please, just tell her I'm here. If she wants me gone, I'll leave." The receptionist relented, making a quick phone call. After a tense few minutes, she returned and nodded curtly. "She'll see you." Arthur walked down the hallway, hands trembling. He found Rosalind sitting on a white wicker chair in a small courtyard, cradling a tiny bundle in her arms. He approached slowly, tears already pricking his eyes at the sight of his wife and child. Rosalind regarded him with a mixture of sadness and caution. He stopped a few feet away, unable to find the right words. Finally, he managed a quiet greeting. "Rosalind." She didn't speak immediately, but her lips quivered as she looked at him. Then she murmured, "His name is Gabriel. I named him without you because I wasn't sure if you'd ever be part of his life." Arthur swallowed a lump in his throat. He's beautiful," he said, gazing at the baby's soft cheeks. "Just like his mother." Rosalind looked away, tears threatening to fall. "Why are you here, Arthur? Is this another one of your misguided attempts to fix something that can't be repaired?" He stepped closer. "I came because I'm sorry, because I lost everything, and I realize, belatedly, that none of it mattered compared to you and our child." She let out a shaky breath. "I've heard your apologies before. I need more than words now." Arthur sank to his knees beside her, careful not to disturb the baby. "I've ended all ties with Cecilia. My business is in shambles. My reputation is ruined. And you know what? I don't care about any of it if it means there's even the slightest chance to earn your forgiveness and be a father to Gabriel." Rosalind locked eyes with him. In that moment, she saw a broken man, humbled by his mistakes. Yet, the wounds he had inflicted on her heart were not so easily healed. She pressed her lips together, tears finally spilling. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Arthur. Not after all the lies, all the betrayal." He nodded, voice cracking with emotion. "I understand, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, or at all. I just need you to know that I love you, and I want to be there for our son." Over the next few days, Arthur visited the retreat daily. Sometimes, Rosalind allowed him to spend time with Gabriel, holding him tenderly, rocking him to sleep. Each time, Arthur was overwhelmed by the tiny human in his arms, a tangible reminder of what truly mattered. He found himself reading parenting books late into the night, calling old associates to gather resources for the child's future, and even considering stepping away from certain business ventures to be more present. Rosalind remained cautious. She was wary of believing in Arthur too quickly, fearful of another heartbreak. Yet, she could not deny the earnestness in his eyes, the shift in his priorities, and the humility he displayed when approaching her. The memory of him ignoring her, overshadowed by the siren call of a mistress, still haunted her. But she also saw a man who had finally confronted his demons. The staff at the retreat, seeing Rosalind's resilience, prepared for her discharge. She had nearly recovered from childbirth and was healthy enough to return to normal life, if such a thing still existed for her. She felt torn about where to go. Returning to the penthouse felt impossible, yet she also couldn't raise Gabriel in a bubble, hidden from the world. One afternoon, Arthur suggested a plan. "Let me get us a small house, in a quiet neighborhood, not the penthouse, not some estate that will attract the media, just a home where we can try to heal, one day at a time." Rosalind studied his face. "Are you sure you want that?" He exhaled. "I've never been more sure of anything. I need to step away from the spotlight, to rebuild trust with you if you'll let me. I'm prepared to do this on my own if you need space, but I'm hoping you'll allow me the chance to prove myself." In a moment of deep reflection, Rosalind decided she wanted to try, for Gabriel's sake, if nothing else. She understood that children flourished best with two supportive parents, though she also recognized that a toxic environment could be more harmful than a single-parent home. But Arthur's sincerity seemed genuine. They found a secluded property in upstate New York, far from the city's prying eyes. The house was modest by millionaire standards, a cozy two-story cottage with a large backyard, perfect for a child to grow up exploring. Arthur hired minimal staff to avoid forming a fortress of luxury around Rosalind. He wanted her to feel safe, not suffocated. During their first weeks there, life was fragile and awkward. They existed in a delicate dance around each other, never quite sure if the marriage could be resurrected. Arthur took on chores he had never done before. Washing dishes, cleaning, even tending to the garden. It was his way of showing Rosalind he was serious about changing. Rosalind, for her part, focused on Gabriel, cherishing every milestone. She continued to work part-time as a lawyer, taking remote cases that allowed her to stay close to her baby. Arthur spent time reading business reports and occasionally traveling to salvage what he could of his empire, but he always rushed back home, not wanting to miss a single moment with his son. Some days were good, filled with laughter at the baby's cute antics. On others, Rosalind would catch a glimpse of an old photograph of Arthur and Cecilia in a magazine or on social media, and the pain would resurface. But each time, Arthur would hold her hand, letting her see the remorse that still weighed on his heart. As months turned into a year, the tabloid frenzy around Arthur's scandal cooled. Cecilia Lancaster had moved on to her next conquests, leaving behind only faint echoes of her destructive presence. Arthur's business slowly stabilized, but it never reached its former glory. His name, once synonymous with unstoppable success, now carried the stigma of scandal, and many in the corporate world refused to trust him. Yet in that modest cottage, Arthur discovered something he never truly had before: genuine peace. The boyish grin that Rosalind had once fallen in love with returned, though tempered by humility. He doted on Gabriel, changing diapers, staying up late to soothe his cries, and reading him bedtime stories. Rosalind began to open her heart again, little by little. She saw that the Arthur sitting beside her during family dinners was not the arrogant magnate who had betrayed her, but a man chastened by suffering, fiercely determined to do better. Slowly, they returned to the intimacy of a married couple, not just physically, but emotionally. They shared fears and hopes, talked late into the night about how to raise Gabriel into a compassionate, strong individual. And so, ironically, while Arthur's fortune shrank and his public image lay in ruins, he found the treasure that truly mattered: his family's gradual acceptance and a renewed sense of purpose. The karma had hit him hard, stripping away layers of superficial success. What remained was a man forced to confront his own weaknesses, to atone and rebuild on a foundation of honesty. Rosalind, meanwhile, grew stronger. She had discovered depths of resilience she never knew she possessed. Though the wounds of betrayal would never fully vanish, they began to scar over, leaving a quieter pain that she used to guide her boundaries and expectations. She would never again accept half measures from Arthur. And he, finally aware of the gift he had almost lost, spent every day proving he was worthy of that second chance. And so ends the tumultuous tale of a millionaire who nearly lost everything to a cunning mistress. From the dizzying heights of success, Arthur Devereux crashed headlong into a storm of scandal, driven by poor decisions and shattered trust. When his pregnant wife, Rosalind, left without a fight, his entire world collapsed, forcing him to confront the stark reality of his choices. Through heartbreak, financial ruin, and humbling regret, he discovered that genuine love and family outshine even the most glittering fortune. In the quiet solace of a modest home, Arthur and Rosalind began their slow journey toward healing, living proof that betrayal can sometimes be the catalyst for profound transformation. If you found this story gripping, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more dramatic and heartfelt stories. Your support keeps us going. Thank you for watching.